It's another edition of WRAL Triangle at 2. I'm Mark Bergin. He is Luis Fernandez. We are back. And Luis, the NBA draft lottery is next week, Monday night, and we find out which team will take and get the rights to draft Cooper Flagg with the number 1 overall pick in June's 2025 NBA draft. And I thought, what better way? Let's do a team draft, best fits for Cooper Flagg. And Luis, the floor is yours. You're going to get the very first pick of the 13 teams that could take the Duke star freshman.
Thank you. And just as a reminder for people watching, just in case you are not in the nitty gritty of the NBA draft lottery, the teams that are in the draft lottery, so essentially the ones that did not make the playoffs, all have a percentage of a chance to get a number 1 pick or a top 5 pick based on how they finished. So in 2018, they changed the rules a little bit so that the number 1 team didn't just have like the biggest chance to avoid tanking, essentially. So now the top 3 teams all have the best chance to get the number 1 overall pick of 14.5%. But as you might imagine, at least in my opinion, Mark, it'd be better for Cooper Flagg if he didn't go to a team that was one of the worst in the NBA last year.
Sure.
So with that in mind, I'm going to go with a team that has a, 6.7% chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, and that is the San Antonio Spurs. Surprise. And I think that has a lot to do with the infrastructure that we've seen around the Spurs. I know they have not had a whole lot of success in recent years. You may argue talent. You may argue, Coach Greg Popovich in the final years of his, tenure as the head coach, and now moving to El Jefe, as he said. So, but I think it's pairing him with players like Victor Wembanyama, who is, I believe it was The Athletic or one of those, organizations that did an anonymous player survey of most likely faces of the NBA in the next 5 years. And Victor Wembanyama won like 58% of the votes. So you're getting a chance to pair him with his generational talent. You're getting a chance to pair him with another player who won Rookie of the Year this year, and Steph Castle. You're getting a lot of talent mixed with organizational, solid foundation and good infrastructure. I think it would be a fantastic fit for Cooper Flagg. Mitch Johnson kind of being handed the reins from Greg Popovich. I think it would be awesome for him. San Antonio is a smaller market. It is in the West, which is a little bit challenging just because of how good the West is, and how many teams you're going to have to compete against in order to get to the Western Conference Finals or anything like that. But when you also look at it, there's a bit of a changing of the guard. LeBron's going to be retiring soon. Steph's getting up there as well. So I think it could be a really good position for Flagg. Not a whole lot of pressure, and an opportunity to grow into his role.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention All-NBA guard De'Aaron Fox, who
exactly
traded for. I want to get to the part you mentioned about potentially pairing Flagg with Victor Wembanyama. The Twin Towers they would be able to form would be similar to that of what the Spurs had with Tim Duncan and David Robinson, say 20 years ago.
Sure.
Luis, to me, though, the difference is like that Wembanyama and Flagg are much closer in age. They're only 3 years apart, whereas Duncan and Robinson were about a decade apart.
Sure.
So the fact that you could pair them together offensively, what they can do and how skilled they are and the size that they have, but defensively, what they would do to teams with their length. Wow.
It'd be ridiculous. And on top of that, I think, if you get into even a more introspective way of looking at it, I don't know if there are many players who can connect with each other the way they might be able to, from just the notion of pressure that they both had to face so early on in their lives. I just think it'd be a really good fit for on the court, off the court. And also it would be one of those fits that would have NBA fans screaming, "Oh, it's rigged! Oh, it's rigged!" And so for Cooper Flagg, that probably would be a really good situation.
The Spurs get 2 cracks at it because they have their first round pick. They also get a selection from Atlanta via trade. So that combines together for the 6.7% chance of getting the top selection. My glass half full perspective, and it's not a very great case, is Popovich stepping away. He's 76, though. It's time, and he's been a terrific coach, but health concerns is why he's moving to the front office. And then potentially the blood clots with Victor Wembanyama. But, Lewis, I've seen the videos on social media of him playing soccer out in Costa Rica, so I'm not too concerned about that. Still a very young player as well. But if I had to go glass half empty, that would be the case that I would make for why it wouldn't work. But I'm with you. I think this would just be a home run for the San Antonio Spurs.
And one thing I want to add in here too is I saw this online. I think it was on the Toronto Raptors subreddit. So shout out to them. Since the odds changed in 2018, right, and the number one pick no longer has the far and away odds, the team with the worst record in the NBA has not won the number one overall pick. You go back through it, right? 2019, it was the 7th best odds. 2020, the 3rd best. 2021 and 22, the 2nd best. 23, the 3rd best. The Hawks, they were the 10th best, and they got that number one overall pick last year. So I think there is the potential for a team that is not the worst to sneak in and get that number one overall pick.
Adam Silver putting his hand in there a little bit. I know David Stern got a lot of grief for that back in the day with various drafts.
Listen, Adam Silver is a Duke grad, so just something to think about. To think about.
All right, let's get weird. My second selection then, because I had Spurs as my number one as well. We're on the same page there. The Dallas Mavericks.
Ooh, I like this.
If Nico Harrison gets the last laugh, the general manager of the Mavericks got so much grief, and rightfully so. It's not that he traded Luka Doncic. It's that he didn't have an open market for Luka Doncic and the return he got back for Luka. But if the Mavericks, who have a 1.8% chance of getting the top selection, wound up getting Cooper Flagg after all this, and you could pair Cooper Flagg with Anthony Davis, Klay Thompson. Now, Kyrie Irving's going to miss at least a chunk of the season as he works his way back from a torn ACL. That's a pretty good nucleus. And the Dallas fans would get some redemption after getting Luka just devastated with the Luka trade to the Lakers.
Well, and I think too, like when you look at the Mavericks last year, their injury luck was just absurdly terrible. It was so bad. They were getting injured left and right, and they still found a way to get into the play-in. So I think similar to maybe some of these other teams we're going to see in a second here on our draft, is that you're going to a team, if you're Cooper Flagg, that has some veteran players, some people who can carry the load, who you can lean on early on in your career and learn from, and you're not necessarily getting all the pressure put on you immediately. Plus, hey, Dallas is that's a huge market. So, I mean, from a, just from him, from like a personal perspective, from like, the pocketbook perspective, that gives him an opportunity to, be a star.
Yep. Anthony Davis in the front court, a former number one pick. And then Derek Lively, the second, also out of Duke. You have a pretty formidable front court there if Flagg were to step into the Mavericks organization. Lewis, you're next on the board, though. That was my selection at number 2.
All right. My second pick overall, and it pains me to say this because I hate the fact that this is even a possibility. It's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
And that's because I don't love the way the 76ers, have run things as a franchise recently. It seems like they make a lot of very kind of like, quick decisions and things along those lines. But when you look at talent that's just on this team, even if Paul George has lost a step, even if Joel Embiid deals with a lot of injuries, there's just so many talented players for him in Philadelphia to work with. Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, the two that I just mentioned. Like it's what the core nucleus of what is already there is ridiculous. Some of those players are a little bit injury prone, so that is a little bit concerning. But also part of this too is he would be in the East. He would be on an established team in the East, which puts him in a position to compete rather quickly, where instead of having to constantly butt heads with the Sheas, the Anthony Edwards, the Victor Wembanyama's, like those type of players, instead you're getting a chance to work in a conference that's going to be a little bit easier for you to have success early. And so I think that would make a lot of sense. The 76ers have a 10.5% chance of getting the number one overall pick.
I don't know what iteration of the process we're in right now, Lewis, But I will say this. You mentioned the talent. You hit the nail on the head there. The 76ers are paying Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey combined about $145 million next season.
That's a lot.
I don't know how, when you look at this roster on paper, Quentin Grimes is a decent player. How this team is in the lottery like all season long, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is almost like an all-star team when healthy.
Right.
It makes no sense to me that the 76ers are even in this position to where they could essentially luck into a generational talent.
Well, and I think that's where, some of the questions I think are going to come up, right? Like the Joel Embiid and his injury history and kind of there's, when you go back to the Ben Simmons situation and all that stuff, there's just this really weird kind of dynamic in a sense. Philadelphia is a tough sports city to play in. Like that is something that I think to keep in mind. But Cooper Flagg always has done, at least in his early career, has done a good job of just kind of like, blocking out the noise, being who he is and all of that stuff. So if there's a player to come in and I think have success in a tough sports city to play, I think it would be Cooper Flagg. But I mean, I think just purely from a basketball perspective, like that's going to be one of the better situations for him to go into.
Nick Nurse has had success as a head coach as well. The 76ers, it's feast or famine because it's almost a 65% chance of getting a top 6 pick. If it falls to 7 or lower, the pick goes to the Oklahoma City Thunder. So the amount of contract that they have, they could salvage it. Whether they get the top pick or one of the top 6, they could very quickly turn things around. They have a lot of talent on the roster. So that's the 76ers. I had them much lower on my list, but I understand the logic there, Lewis.
Sure.
I'm going
to be clear too, I think that like we focus on Cooper here, but this is a very good draft class. Like if you're getting a top 5 pick, you are feeling very good. Okay, Mark. So we've gone over my first 2 picks. Who were your first? Who was your second round pick?
My next pick would be the Houston Rockets, and some people might feel that getting bounced in the first round, they were 2 seed in the West to a Golden State Warriors team that has at least 3 Hall of Famers on it in Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Jimmy Butler. It's a team that plays hard. They're very young. Thompson out on the perimeter is one of the best athletes in the league, maybe in all of sports.
Right.
And so you pair Cooper Flagg in there with a lot of young talent, a team that's on the up and up. And Ime Udoka, at least as a head coach, is one of the better coaches in the NBA in terms of getting the most out of his players. I had the Houston Rockets as my next pick for those reasons.
Yeah, they were next on the list for me. 3.8% for the Houston Rockets. Mm-hmm. I think it's great from a talent perspective, right? They took the Warriors 7. So many of those games were so close. You kind of feel like they're right on the cusp. And they've been stacking young talent for so long now. Mm-hmm. And it's also a culture perspective, right? Like what Cooper Flagg can bring, especially defensively to a group like that. That's a very natural fit. I like that a lot as well. I think that's a great choice.
All right. So we've got Houston. You're next up, Lewis.
So I'm going to go with a team that is at 7.5% chance to get the number 1 overall pick, the Toronto Raptors. And
whoa, okay.
I like the Raptors for a variety of reasons in this situation. I think that they have a plan in place. It's not so far out since they had a lot of success. What I like about the Raptors is similar to the Rockets, they've been kind of stashing away young talent, whether that be, Scotty Barnes, whether that be, former Duke player RJ Barrett, a lot of these different pieces. I also like it from a individual player perspective where the pressure is, and I think that's kind of where I'm thinking with some of this too, is like what's going to make the most, like what's going to be good for Cooper Flagg. There would be a little bit less pressure in Toronto, I feel like. The Raptors are loved. So I think that would also go a long way. And once again, you're going to the East. You're going to an opportunity where you can, I think, quickly make some noise. So that's why I go with the Raptors. They're one of those teams that you mentioned that's kind of like right in the middle. You know what I mean? Where it's not that they have a great chance. It's not that they have a bad chance either. But I'm going with the Raptors.
With respect to Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, the Raptors had the 1 year where they were contenders and they won it all with Kawhi was so exciting, but it came and went. I don't fault them for making that move. They won the championship, one of the most exciting playoff runs. Post Kawhi era, and then with respect to Kyle Lowry and DeRozan, it's like this is a franchise that has struggled with relevancy league wide really since like Vince Carter. So it's like I think of like Carter, Lowry, DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard, and my perspective here, Lewis, would be like, would we forget about Cooper Flagg that he's playing in Canada, that he's playing in Toronto?
Yeah.
I do understand the argument, though, playing in the Eastern Conference where it would be easier for him and maybe not as much limelight would do him better. But I just want to see Cooper Flagg on a stage where his talent is best showcased. I'm not sure that that's in Toronto. That's just
that's fair. This team is like 4th or 5th on my list. But I think that there's some potential there. And that's kind of why I go with him in this situation. I'm curious. I have another team that's right up there that we can talk about soon. But you go ahead and let me hear your, what is this, number 3 overall for you?
Yeah, this took great restraint. Well, I mean, I had some of the same.
I know exactly where you're going.
Chicago Bulls, man. And let me lay this out there for you. This is the epitome of a mediocre franchise right now. 3 consecutive play-in tournament appearances. They've won goose egg. None of them. You're talking about a team that's in the 3rd largest media market in Chicago behind New York and LA. You're talking about a team that hasn't been relevant since the Derrick Rose era. They haven't had a star of this caliber since Derrick Rose, and before that, Michael Jordan. With respect to Jimmy Butler, he didn't become a superstar till he left Chicago. You want to get a fan base fired up, a franchise that consistently leads the NBA in home attendance and the fans that pack the UC. This is my inner city meatball Chicagoan coming out, Lewis, but Cooper Flagg to the Bulls would revitalize and galvanize a city around him. It would be awesome to watch. Cooper Flagg in a Chicago Bulls uniform, man.
So, the Bulls would have been my number 3 pick, but I wanted to make sure that you got the Bulls because of how
you're polite.
Important they are to you, and how important they are to you. No, I agree. That's one of those kind of like just fun, like jump off the page type choices. Putting him in this huge market, I think that would be really cool.
The league is better, Lewis, when the Knicks, the Lakers, and the Celtics are relevant.
Sure. Throw the Bulls in there if you want to as well.
Yes.
I know. I think that's fair. I mean, just think back to the D Rose days and how fun it was to watch the Bulls. Yeah.
I've got one more nugget. A 1.7% chance for the Bulls to get the top pick, which was the same odds they had in 2008 when they drafted Rose.
Well, there you go.
So they'd pair with Buzelis, got Kobe White out of UNC, and then Josh Giddey. So they have a few decent young pieces, but the Bulls are my pick. Lewis, you're up next.
So I am going to grab a team now that it'll be the first of the top 3 that we've mentioned. And by top 3, I mean the teams that have like the best chance. Like statistically, these are the teams that are probably going to end up getting Cooper Flagg.
It's 14%.
14.5%. The top 3 teams, the worst 3 teams in the NBA this year. It's not the Charlotte Hornets. It is not the Washington Wizards. I'm going to go with the Utah Jazz.
Okay.
And Utah Jazz have the number 1 overall pick. Well, excuse me. They have the best odds for the number 1 pick, or they were the worst team. So they're tied for the best odds. And I think the reason why I'm going with the Jazz is because of all of the teams in that kind of really bad range, they feel like the one that has the most like concrete plan that they've been like enacting since they got rid of like, Quinn Snyder and Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and all of them. It feels like they have this kind of like trajectory that they're aiming for. They got Markkanen, they got Walker Kessler. They've got some players, I think, who can make a difference. I think going to the West is always tough. But I think that being in Utah, I think that Cooper Flagg could, it's not a huge market, with the Jazz, but it's one of those ones where he could come in and be like a immediate favorite type thing. He's going to be a favorite wherever he goes. They also just signed head coach Will Hardy to a contract extension just a few days ago. So that feels like there's a little bit more continuity there. So I think what you're doing is you're taking a team that has some really good pieces, that has a plan and has a foundation. Because the one thing for any top pick that I really want to try and avoid is being one of those situations where you're constantly getting changes, where you never have a chance to kind of see where things go, to grow within a system. The fifth year quarterback that's had 4 different offensive coordinator type things. And I think that the Jazz have some consistency. And I think of all of the teams that have the best chances, I think that would be the best situation for Cooper Flagg to walk into.
The Jazz have a ton of picks, so they'll have this lottery pick, the number 21 pick, 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. There's going to be a huge influx of talent that's coming into Utah. Utah is a tough place to attract free agents, typically.
Which is fair.
Typically. Now, you mentioned the Will Hardy extension. He has connections to the Boston Celtics. Before he came to Utah, was a coach under Ime Udoka. And then Danny Ainge in the front office, also a longtime Celtics guy. How they're going to try to build this team and construct it similar to what has turned Boston into a perennial contender, now trying to go for back-to-back titles this season.
Yeah, this
makes a lot of sense to me if he were to wind up with the Jazz, if Cooper Flagg were to wind up there for how Boston was constructed.
And I was going back and forth between having Toronto and having Utah kind of like first in that order. But I think too, it's like the ability to craft a team around him. I think that's also part of it too. So of all of the bad teams, Utah, I think, makes the most sense, would be the best landing spot for Flagg.
Yeah, I've got the Wizards up next.
Fair. Yeah.
Also one of the teams with one of the worst records and the best odds of landing the number 1 overall pick. And then we've got the marketing campaign already written, Lewis. Salute the flag, our nation's capital. Are you kidding me? Print the shirts, sell the jerseys, get people riled up in our nation's capital. It'd be exciting. Like, the Wizards haven't had this type of hope potentially really since like the John Wall, Bradley Beal era.
No, I mean, I think that's totally fair. And I think that the one thing about the Wizards, is obviously they've been in this position for quite some time now, kind of in that top 5, like not really, where are they going, like that kind of thing. But no, I think that totally fits. They had some really good pieces. I think Alex Sarr really impressed this year as a rookie. I think that they had a couple of guys who you can see them starting to build a future around, and Cooper Flagg could be like the guy that ends up being, the star there in Washington. And I think the Wizards being really good, you have to go back to like the Bradley Beal, John Wall days. Like that could also, I think, just be interesting for the NBA as a league as a whole.
All right, that's my pick. You're up next, Lewis.
I am going to go and see now we're getting to the point where we're like, all right, who haven't we said yet? But of the group here that's left, I'm going to go with a team that also has a top 5 odds. I'm going to go with the New Orleans Pelicans. They are.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
12.5% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. And the Pelicans are so weird to me because so much of who they are has revolved around Zion, over the past, few years. And because of that, there's been ups where he's playing and he's healthy and you're like, oh my gosh, like this guy is just, he's transcendental, like all of that stuff. And then there are the downs when he's not healthy, where there's talks about his conditioning and all of that stuff. So I think, I don't know what the future holds for Zion in New Orleans, but this, if you're the Pelicans, this is going to be one of those situations where, maybe you make it a little more enticing for him by having someone like Cooper. They have so many solid pieces that just have not been able to kind of fit together to reach their potential. And so I think that New Orleans would make a lot of sense. I think it would make a lot of Duke fans happy. And once it's in the West, so that is a challenge. But I do think it'd be a good position for him.
It would be a huge identity crisis for a franchise of if you draft Flagg, what does that mean for Zion Williamson?
Yep.
on the court, if they could make that happen, I would love to see it.
It'd be sweet.
Zion Williamson is essentially a coin flip whether he plays. He's 24 years old. Out of 410 regular season games in his career of the possibility that he could play, he's played in 214.
Right.
It's about 52%. So he's essentially coin flip if he plays or not. Most regular season games he's played in a single season is only 70, Lewis.
Yep.
So the Duke connection is fun. I'm like, if it didn't work in New Orleans with Anthony Davis, and it hasn't to this point with Williamson, how would Flagg be any different? But I would want to see it. I kind of want to see it. It would be fun.
In a vacuum, I would honestly have the Pelicans much higher on this list. But I think because of what you mentioned there, the history, just the uncertainty about what things would look like with Zion and all that stuff, that's why they're lower on this list for me. Just because you're like, oh, I don't like if it hadn't worked with Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins, if it didn't work with Zion, what's to say that Cooper Flagg going in there would be any different? So there's uncertainty, but also, hey, we're 4-5 picks into this thing already, so we're almost out of the lottery team. So who do you got next?
Hornets, and it's the young talent. It's LaMelo Ball, and maybe I've seen too many Twitter highlights of him doing things I've never seen a guard do before. Brendan Miller's a nice forward as well. Mark Williams, I think you have a decent core right there. That being said, this is a franchise that has missed the playoffs in 9 consecutive seasons. During that span, they have one winning record. And in the last 3 years, they've failed to win 30 games in a single season. I know they have a new head coach in Charles Lee. I knew ownership's taking over. But this has been a dormant franchise. Flagg would get to stay in the state of North Carolina, but you do have some young pieces. I think Flagg, if he joined the Hornets, it wouldn't be even so much his offense, but just saying we need to start to have a defensive identity to actually have some real success. But I had the Hornets next on my list.
Be serious. That's what that would be for me. And, I think, there's, I've joked just talking with people. It's like, oh, I don't want to go to the Hornets because, you don't, it's not like there's a lot of success over there. But, things are slightly changing, right? New ownership and things are changing with the Hornets a little bit. Like they've got some good pieces. I don't know. It's you, like you said, you're really leaning into the young talent with the Hornets there. It'll be interesting. Keeping him in North Carolina, I think would be fun. But yes, I agree. I think we did the top 3 in the correct order there. You know what I mean? Like Jazz, Wizards, Hornets. That's the order of the top 3 teams I would want him to go to. With my next pick, we only got a couple teams left. I am going to go to the West, and I'm going to go to the Portland Trail Blazers. And this is another team that kind of similar to some of the ones we've talked about already. They're in this area. They've racked up young talent, and so now it's about coming together. Now, obviously, I picked the Raptors early on, so I'm not too worried about the market. Because that is one of those things where I'm like, okay, if he goes to Portland, like, will he kind of, what's going to be the market size there for Cooper Flagg? But I do think that there's some young talent there. I think of these teams remaining, Portland would make sense.
You hung on to your Scoot Henderson stock, is what it sounds like to me, my friend.
You remember that?
Yeah, Portland was last on my list. I like Scoot Henderson. Donovan Clingan was their first round pick a year ago, a big man out of UConn. Anthony Simons, DeAndre Ayton. I do like Chauncey Billups and the leadership he could provide, a winning background as a player. They just newly extended him. Again, I think a lot's going to be contingent on the development of the other young players versus how Cooper Flagg would be entering that mix.
We're in the bottom 3 now, so none of these are exactly. Yeah, I'm excited.
I had the Nets next. The New York market's always going to belong to the New York Knicks, but the Nets will have a first-round pick, a lottery pick for the first time since 2010.
All right.
And so the Nets will have 4 first-rounders overall. They get one from Houston, Milwaukee, and New York. So there's going to be a lot of influx of young talent. And ESPN's reporting that they're going to have $40 million in salary cap space. So if you added Flagg to that mix, the idea would be you'd have flexibility either through free agency or through a trade with a disgruntled star of, hey, come play with Cooper Flagg and set yourself up in the New York market for years to come.
Well, and we've already seen that free agents are willing to go to Brooklyn. So I think I think that's good. I think that's good. Which I believe leaves me with the last team,
Kings,
the Sacramento Kings.
No, hang on, check that, Lewis. The Sacramento Bulls.
The Sacramento Bulls. No, I think that's fair. That's fair. If the one thing when you look at the Kings this year is that, and just in general, right, when you go back to the Hallie trade, when you go back to the De'Aaron Fox trade, they've gotten rid of so many point guards. They've gotten rid of so many players. I think it was Sabonis who essentially was like, yeah, we really need a point guard, which felt like a little bit of a dig. So, with that in mind, I think Cooper Flagg could come in and be an immediate leader for this team. He on the court, especially, he would be, the guy who's, really doing a lot of ball handling for them. And this kind of leans into a role, I think, similar to what he was at Duke. At this point, once again, it's the West, the Sacramento's tough because, you're not the Lakers, you're not the Warriors. So once again, you kind of go back to the spotlight and all of that stuff. But yeah, they're last on our board for a reason. So there you go.
It's hard for me to get excited about the possibility of the Kings because it's less than a 1% chance. In Levine and Deronen are fine players, but it didn't really work in Chicago. So why it would work out West years later as they start to get older, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me, Lewis. So it's hard for me to get excited about this either way. And again, the possibilities are so small. So it's like, why try to go crazy with it?
Yeah, and that's essentially when this last kind of like half of the lottery picks where you're just like, all right, cool. I mean, if he goes to, Portland, if he goes to, who else did we say here? If he goes to the Hornets, if he goes to the Wizards, whatever.
New Orleans,
cool. New Orleans, it's like cool, but I agree. I think there are some teams, that I would be very excited for Cooper Flagg to go to. And for his sake, for the NBA's sake, with just how big of a talent he is, I hope it ends up being a really good destination for him.
This is a very talent-rich draft outside of Flagg, so we'll have full coverage on WRALSportsFan.com, and I cannot wait to watch the draft lottery because when each team sends their representatives, just the gamesmanship, the facial expressions, this is a very talent-rich draft. I would say the most heralded prospect since Victor Wembanyama. Before that, I really have to think about it, Lewis. So we're talking about a generational prospect in Cooper Flagg. So that'll be Monday night.
Oh, do you want me to say anything else there at the end?
All right. That'll wrap us. He's Luis Fernandez. I'm Mark Bergin. This has been another edition of WRAL Triangle in 2. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and so long, everybody.